Hello, my name is David Jirout. I work at Sweco in Uppsala, Sweden. And today I'd like to show to you how we work with carbon and cost-driven visualizations in Solibri. A little bit about myself. I am working as the sustainability coordinator at Sweco. My job is to inspire others, my colleagues who are really good in IT, to do sustainability value in their projects, to do climate value in their projects, and to connect all of these amazing technologies that we have today to deliver this value to our projects and help to mitigate the various environmental issues that we are facing today.
Hi, David. This is also Riina from Solibri. I have also a few words before we start the actual session. Thanks a lot for your introduction, and we are very happy to have you in our this month's Customer Insights webinar session. Yeah. So first off, I would like to. Sorry.
Can you see my screen?
Probably not yet. I think I'm showing my screen to go just run through quickly a couple of things before we start the actual presentation. So firstly, I would just like to check that everyone hears okay. Screen is fine. At least there's something. Someone can't hear, someone can hear. Okay, most people are hearing well. That's great. Thanks for that. And there were already some questions on are we recording this webinar? So answer is yes, we are recording this and we will share the recording to everyone after the session. So hi, I'm Riina, working from my home office, as probably most of you are. I'm gonna be your host today, and David already briefly introduced himself. David is our speaker for today. So here's the agenda. So David will go through the case Sweco on communicating sustainability aspects and using value-driven visualizations and how to do these type of things in Solibri. After David's session, we also have a Q&A. So you can send your questions in the chat at any point during this webinar, and then we will go your questions through during the Q&A session in the end. Also, before I give the floor back to David, I would just quickly like to run this poll. This time we'd like to ask you if there are any industry trends that are affecting to your business. Of course, at the moment, this situation that we're facing worldwide might affect to people's or businesses strategies and the priorities, but yes, so you should see the poll. I'll give you a couple of minutes to answer. So yeah, there's a lot of answers coming in. That's great. There are quite many answers given already on this sustainability factor, which is great to hear, as this is very much the topic for today. So you should be getting a lot of good insight to that area today from David. Just a couple of minutes more for you to reply. All right, thank you. So this is how it looks. Majority of you are looking into increasing the utilization or integration of BIM in your work, then the next biggest trend affecting to your business is the sustainability and greener construction. So this was very interesting to hear. Thanks everyone for giving your insight to this. But yeah, so without further ado, let's give David the floor and let him go through his presentation.
Thank you so much, Rina. First, let's show my screen. I see that there is some image going on. I will set myself for the time being to not disturb mode. And I'm really I'm really glad for this event to take place. When we first started to organize this event with Rina from Solibri and others, I was so surprised for them that they were so surprised that I have actually utilized Solibri to do sustainability value. And for me, Solibri has been always the first choice BIM tool that I have worked with as a BIM coordinator. But once we sort of started to use it at Sweco for visualizing carbon, visualizing costs, it sort of gained a new value to our whole value chain. But I will get to all of that. Today, I would like to present a service that we call BIM Vision. It's based on Solibri, but today we are having and developing BIM Vision also on Revit and Microsoft Teams. And the purpose is to help interpret carbon numbers. When I worked as a BIM coordinator in various projects, I realized that when the environmental consultant came with climate calculations, there were very few engineers who would be able to act upon those numbers. If you say to your designers, okay, you have 6,500 tons of carbon in your construction, people don't really know what to do with that. And BIM Vision is here to change that. So let me go on with my presentation. So this is a typical example of component type-based visualizations. This is what we see in CAD and BIM tools today. Walls are for some reason gray, and slabs are for some reason green, and so on. These types of visualizations can create a technocratic approach to design, which is of course very beneficial if you are a structural engineer or an MEP engineer. But does this picture really tell you what are the sustainability aspects of the building? Where do we have problematic parts from the carbon perspective, from the cost perspective? And the answer is no. Let's take a look at the GIS branch for a while. This is a typical topographic map, and you don't really need to understand topography, but you understand immediately where there are mountains, where there are high values in this data. And BIM Vision is trying to do this for BIM and CAD today. So the purpose of the service is to make environmental data accessible and visual to act upon. We no longer want to deliver carbon numbers and only measure the damage. We want to create subjective reactions within the users of the BIM model. And here comes user experience design as a technical discipline from systems development to use. Because if you figure out how to visualize components, you can trigger reactions in the design team. And this is something we have been working on during the last 2 years. The other purpose is to semi-automate and democratize who can do climate calculations. The purpose of BIM Vision is to deliver good enough Solibri model for any user to create a climate calculation, a cost calculation on their own when they need it. And also to visualize the model based on the results. And basically to simplify the whole work with environmental questions. There are very few people who understand what these abbreviations actually mean. We see carbons of CO2 equivalent very often, but there are many more types of environmental impact we are not yet working with in construction design. And value-driven visualizations can actually help us to make the right decisions without us understanding the basic science behind it. So here I have some examples of carbon-driven visualizations. I have a structural model that is visualized based on the emission factors. I've got a series of emission factors for various materials, and the materials that have low impact, they're blue. Materials that have high impact per kilogram of material, they turn pink. Here I have a visualization of net carbon. I've got a material which causes 6,200 tons of CO2 equivalent from production stage. And I've got other materials that do not have as high impact. And you can see that visually. So we connect carbon calculations with objects in Solibri. And as a result of that, you can produce integrated digital quantity takeoffs, but you also take the carbon numbers with you. So I have one column here where I've mapped emission factors from the A1 to A3 production stage with the components, and for the other life cycle stages, including the functional units, which would life cycle analysis like to see. And even the colors come with, so that you can understand where in your design sits carbon and in what life cycle stage is crucial for the design team. But we've done also some cost-driven visualizations. Here I have a structural visualization. Here I have a structural model visualized based on the cost of material. So any Excel data can be transformed into colors. And for those who are techie in this forum, I will show you how to do that here in the coming minutes. First, about the process. So you need someone who gathers data. If you're doing cost visualizations, if they are material costs or production costs or whatever cost they are, you need somebody who understands that process, that data, and deliver you an Excel sheet with a list of materials, let's say, and their production cost. So you always have to have the person who understands the topic. In the case of environmental data, you need an LC analyst. And those roles stand for the relevance of data that comes in. Then you have to have a model responsible. That's the person who is drawing the architectural model. That's the person who is drawing the structural model, the MEP model, and so on. And they have to follow a BIM manual. And here's where we come to preconditions already. So for this to work, you have to have a really good BIM manual, a chapter on sustainability, on costs, and so on the data that you want to visualize in value-driven manner. And they have to make sure that the IFC export will be good enough for mapping in Solibri later on. And then you have the BIM coordinator who stitches everything. So we call this BIM coordinator sustainability at Sweco. This person stitches the data from Excel, whatever they are, their costs, carbon, or loads, or flows, or energy consumption, or anything. Any Excel data, any Excel numbers can be mapped with CAD objects in Solibri. So this person, BIM coordinator sustainability, stitches everything by mapping Excel data to objects. And the better the manual, the better the BIM manual, the shorter the process is. And here's what we offer to our customers within BIM Vision as a service. We have 3 courses at Sweco in Sweden. BIM Vision for Solibri, where we in 8 hours do and teach what I will do now in the coming 30 minutes. Then we've got Solibri Basics and Solibri Advanced for users who have never come across with BIM or are afraid of BIM. And this Solibri Advanced course is for BIM coordinators to do 3D coordination and prepare the model for facility management. And then you have these 3 packages that you can order within BIM Vision. The first package is preconditions. So we have to understand you as a customer, how you do your facility management, how do you think about costs, how do you think about time, and so on. So there are a series of interviews where I will learn what is crucial for your business, what is crucial for how you want to develop your building and estate. Then, as a result of these interviews, we set together a BIM manual that will basically tackle the needs and make sure that the design organization will deliver models that will have information necessary about the crucial sustainability aspects that you choose within them. And there is some property sets for Revit that we usually deliver, or the tools that you are working with. The second package is the visualize and calculate part, and then that we do in Solibri, Revit, and Microsoft Teams. Yeah, and we can do this in Microsoft Teams using Autodesk Forge and BIM 360. And actually, I will focus the rest of the presentation on this part, how you can visualize and calculate carbon using Solibri. And then if you're lacking environmental data, then we also connect our environmental consultants who will make sure that the relevance of data is in there in your project. And this is the machinery behind BIM Vision. So this was the introduction. Now let's get to the crash course in BIM Vision. So this is my BIM Vision cheat sheet, and the workflow looks like this. First, we have to prepare our Excel data so it looks like database. I will work with Excel data of that has emission factors per material, and that data comes from Swedish Transportation Administration, Trafikverket, and particularly their tool called Klimatkalkyl, climate calculator. Then we have to prepare the classifications, where we will basically import the data. Then we will produce information takeoff with environmental data, in this case, carbon. And if we will even manage, I can show you how you can aggregate net carbon and import it back to Solibri and do the visualizations again. All right, Arina, I wonder if you can share both of my screens. Is that possible?
It's actually, I think it's in your end to manage the screens you want to share. I don't know if you can share two screens.
Never mind. Let's share one screen and I will switch.
Yeah.
All right. So here I'm in Solibri, and I have opened a structural model of a project that I will not name. Those of you know, you know. And it's an empty IFC model. This is a pure export. You can see that there are no classifications. I've done nothing with any of the Solibri features. If you go to checking, it's empty. I've just opened an IFC model. All the features, all the views are empty, basically. At Sweco Sweden, in the Swedish license pool, we have an extension available, BIM Vision, and anybody who is in the Swedish Sweco license pool has access to this. Here comes an interesting feature in Solibri, and that is roles. You can open roles. There is a series of roles depending on what activity you plan to do in Solibri. And that's basically a shortcut to classifications and information takeoffs and even some rule sets. And in the BIM Vision extension, we have the BIM Vision role, which when I will open, it will suggest that I open these classifications, and I will explain how they are built in a short notice. And then it will also bring on one information takeoff template that generates the bill of quantities. And thus you can very easily populate your Solibri model with interesting features. Okay, so let's give the model some time. And here comes a really important message. If you are working in a big organization, let's say Trafikverket, or let's say you have a huge asset management, or you have huge assets, and you build buildings on everyday basis. It's very important that you have one really good integrated BIM manual that you distribute to all the projects, and that all the projects do design and work with metadata in a similar way. Because what happens is that you can develop an extension for your organization that will work with some template generic environmental data or cost data. And then no matter what IFC, from no matter what project you open, you can get immediately on one click all of this work done. So from in this extension, I have a classification that's called global warming potential. And here comes the Swedish Transportation Administration's emission factors. And I can visualize the model based on emission factors. Here I can see, okay, I've got here I've components that cause 1.5 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per kilogram of material. Those are the emissions from the production stage. And here I've got materials that cause 0.17 kilograms of CO2 equivalent. And without any work, I've just opened an IFC, opened an extension, and the model gets populated by really interesting insights. And that's what we want. We want insights, because upon insights, we can actually act. If you present an life cycle analysis calculation in Excel or in pie charts or in one-click LCA, don't get me wrong, those are great tools, but it's really hard to act upon because it's so abstract. I've got another extension. I've got another classification here called aggregated results visualization. And here I've got materials that cause 6,200 ton of CO2 equivalent. And obviously this is the visually and numerically the carbon problem in the project, these materials. And you can click on this object, bring on all the metadata about it. Here it says material, BIM Vision shared material, armerad betong, which in Swedish means reinforced concrete. This is the carbon problem in the project. So what do we do about it? That's the question to the designers, not to me. I am here to deliver these insights. But so in a really short time, you can open any model if you have one concise BIM manual and all the projects are following it, and you demand a very specific way for the designers to fill in information about materials, about costs and so on. And you can get these insights right away. But I promise that I will do this from scratch. So let's close this model. And before I close it, I will actually show you the information takeoff template and how that works. So I've got a template here that will quantify the model and do it together with the carbon numbers. But before I do that, I will only select part of the building, not the whole building, so that we do not wait that long time. In Solibri, you can always select part of the design. I have selected this part called 07, and now I have done the quantity takeoff for this building. And what comes with the values about volumes and area and so on is the Excel data that I imported. So in this case, it's densities. That's always important to work with when we are working with environmental issues. Global warming potential, the emission factors, and the functional units that we need for life cycle analysis. And then you can report that to Excel. So this is what you can do with Solibri. But how do we get to this result? How do we get to these insights from scratch? Let me close this model. and start from the very beginning. Recent. And now I will open it again, and it's empty. So let's come back to my cheat sheet. So first you have to prepare your Excel data. I will work with carbon numbers here. And you have to structure the Excel data so it would look like a database. Now, let's take a look at this. This part of the Excel is a database, whereas this part is a mesh of values. Sometimes you get Excel data and you've got parts of data here, parts of data there, parts of data there. This is not an Excel database. An Excel database, you really have to have one integrated table. And this is what you can import in Solibri. So first, structure your data so it would look like a database, so that you have an uninterrupted series of rows and columns. What we are looking at is a tool that I developed that translates numbers into colors. I have here in this column numeric input that I will convert into colors. And here I have an exponentially growing series of numbers. And basically this means that for the values that have the span in between 1 and 32, the algorithm will return blue colors. Blue in our cultural context is a calming color. This is again studied from the user experience design, and this is very important that we actually take a look at what the user experience has researched and use that knowledge in value-driven visualizations in CAD and BIM. For these values that are getting higher, I will get red or warm-like colors. I've got one color palette that I really like, and I will copy the settings here, paste as values. This color palette is my favorite because I have a conversion from blue to alarmingly red, and the red basically comes in the very high values, and this is what I want. I do not want to deliver objective calculations of carbon. We have done that. I want to deliver visualizations of carbon that will alarm the organization and make it easy for the organization, for the project organization, to focus on problematic issues. So I'm coming from being objective to being subjective and knowingly triggering reactions. It's quite interesting. You can generate, with this algorithm, you can generate about, I've come to about 100 different color combinations. I have not yet fully explored its potential. But what is quite interesting is that you can also use one color in different saturations. And this is very good if you have colorblind people in your project. Men tend to be colorblind more than women. And we should not underestimate knowing that there are colorblind people and that they cannot tell the difference between red and green. But this is shortly about the coloring algorithm. So basically, you have a series of values, no matter what it is, if it's costs, if it's carbon, if it's loads, if it's energy consumption, water consumption, anything. And any numbers can be converted to a color palette in a relationship to each other. All right. So let's go to the next step. Once I have done the choice of my color palette, I can go further, copy its settings. I've got 300. And here it's where it comes interesting. So here comes my Excel data. What you see in column A is the name of the material, and these are names from the Swedish tool climate calculator, from the Swedish administration's tool climate calculator. So they are in Swedish, but some names you can understand. Aluminium, asphalt, armerad betong, as I said, means reinforced concrete, and so on. There are about 40 materials that the Trafikverket, the Swedish Transportation Administration, likes to work with. And here comes the global warming potential, the emission factor per functional unit. Now, for you who is a BIM techie guy, when you're working with carbon, there are a few things you have to learn. The environmental data that is out there in databases like EnvironBeck, or in One-Click LCA will always tell you a number for a material per life cycle stage. So the stages is something we have to work with very closely, and that number is valid for a functional unit. In this case, functional unit is 1 kilogram of material. So we will emit 1.54 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per 1 kilogram of material. Now, some analyses I've seen communicate the carbon footprint per square meter. That's in the case of doors or windows, but it can also come in cubic meters in terms of concrete and so on. So you really have to be vigilant about what functional units are there used when you're working with carbon or any other type of environmental impact. The life cycle stages are following the norm called ISO EN 15804. And there are 17 life cycle stages out there. In this case, we have carbon numbers for life cycle stages A1 to A3, and there are some of these 3 stages, which means the production of the product. So in this case, 8.4 kilograms of CO2 equivalent only resembles the production phase of aluminium, not its use, not its disposal, not its transportation to site, not its manufacturing on site, only the production of the component. I will go on. I have applied my color scheme, and I'm using blue in different saturations. Once I've done that, I have to save this as a regular XLSX format. Solibri does not import XLSM format with macros, only the basic ones. And I will save it on my desk. I will save it on my desktop to make it easy for me. Yes, let's go on. So I've structured my data. I've got emission factors. In your project, you will get this from the environmental consultant in your project or a person with a similar role. If you're working with costs or production or time planning, you will get a similar Excel sheet from the person in your project who is responsible to work with the relevance of these numbers. So, all right, that's the first step. I've got my Excel data. I've structured them as an Excel database, and I have applied the coloring algorithm. In our course, BIM Vision for Solibri at Sweco, we teach people how to do that on their own. Here we basically see how I work with it in practice. Then we've got the classifications. And before I go any further to Solibri, I will show you my classification hierarchy pyramid, which is what I call it. I do not have a better name, but this will have to do. And let me open Solibri on the other side, close. So they are, where is my model? It does not show. Let's try to import it again. While Solibri works, let me talk about my hierarchy. So in your project, there will be certain features that will be included in calculation and not included in calculation. For example, the customer is interested in climate calculations of the structure, but not of the facade or windows and other soft parts or carbon soft parts in the design. So you will have to include what parts of the here's my model. What parts of the model are going to be calculated and what are not. These belong to my shared category. Then we've got material densities. You will have to import densities at some point, either to the original model or to Solibri. Why? Because the emission factors are mostly communicated in functional units per kilogram of material. BIM software is really good with working with geometries, but if you do not have density for the material somewhere, you will not get to relevant carbon data. So density is something we always should work with in BIM when we are going to work with carbon. And then the top of the pyramid is basically dependent on what you're trying to achieve. If you're trying to achieve carbon cost, carbon visualizations, carbon calculations, then you're going to focus on carbon data. If you're trying to achieve cost-driven visualizations, then you will have to work with costs. And the top of the pyramid can be as broad as you want it. But at the bottom of the pyramid, you will always have material names, densities, and what is included in calculation. So let me go to my roles and open my role. I will close that and I will add classifications right here. So when we have the pyramid on the right side and the classifications on the left side, here are my shared classifications. I call them shared because they are the base for whatever analysis you're doing. So first, at the very bottom is the one called included in calculation. And here it's called including components. You have, you must specify what disciplines, what component types, what is it in your model that you are actually going to include in calculation, and what you're going to exclude. In this case, I am including structural, and I'm excluding architectural, landscape, facility management, and the other disciplines, because the customer is not interested in doing carbon calculations on architecture in this project. And you can be as niched as you want to. If you add a new column, you can always draw from all of the metadata, including property sets in this Solibri model. And what I will do is that I will basically use the site parameter and specify, hold on, let's take a look at the metadata. To classically shift solid. I want to work with a specific part of the building. Location, building 11. All right, let's include parameter called building. And I want to work with the section that is called 11. So let's say the customer says, all right, we want you only to work with this part of the building. So in your classification rules, you have two classes, not included and included in calculation. You specify, and this varies from project to project, what is it that you want to include in calculation, what is it you want to exclude. And it's important that you do it. All of the components should be classified, either included or excluded. And when I'm happy, I will simply go on. So now I've got the visualizations of the components that will not be included in purple or pink. And here I've got those that will be included in calculation. So let's go on. When I've done that, we have to look at the materials. And time is running out, so I will be very quick here. Here's where you do the import. Here's where you import from Excel. Basically, you have these two buttons: import from Excel, export to Excel. And here's where you take the list of the materials. You take your Excel file and you import the list of materials. Sorry, you import them here as classes. And here is where you do the mapping as well. So you must map based on metadata what objects are basically what class. In this case, the class is armera beton, reinforced concrete. So from the list of Excel, here is where I've got my reinforced concrete. I have to map all the objects using this material classification. When I've done that, I come to the coloring part, and that's in settings. That's the global warming potential. Basically, I specify, I import the whole Excel sheet. Let me go to desktop. And I found my sheet here. And you take the rows where you've got the values, and you must map the columns, right? So you can see that the colors that were generated by my algorithm, they're in column D, which is why the color of the component must be in color D. And then you basically, classification name is set right. Sorry, classification name in this case are the carbon numbers. And then you select the rows that you want to import. Now you want to import only, you do not want to import titles, but you want to import only the data. So I'm importing two columns in this case, column B and column D. Next, next, finish. And now I've got another color palette. The tricky thing is that Solibri imports comma in a different way than a point. In Excel, it depends on whatever Excel you were working with. But let me do a correction. Basically, you have to rewrite these decimal commas to decimal points. I will only do this for the two values that I have actually in my model for steel and concrete. Right. And now the model has got the same color representation as I have in my Excel file. And then you can come to the quantity takeoff. And you have seen that part from the section before. But like this, you can create value-driven visualizations that help. I've got a darker model, I have darker parts of the model here, and the brighter parts of the model here. And using value-driven visualizations with an algorithm that I have written, you can improve the communication of carbon values. And that is basically the point of BIM Vision. And if you do not have a professional climate calculator or using one-click LCA in your project, you can produce an information takeoff. Yeah, let's select this part of the building. You can produce an information takeoff that is, sorry, let's select building number 11. You can produce information takeoff, including the carbon numbers, including the emission factors. And what I will not have time to show today is how you can create a template in Excel which automatically multiplies volume times density times emission factor so that you get netto carbon calculations in Excel upon the export. But believe me, you can do that. And this is what we do too. Here is where I would like to open up or pass the word back to Rina to moderate the discussion.
Thanks so much, David. This was super interesting topic. So yeah, we've already got a lot of questions here. If you have any more questions, just send them to the chat. Most of the questions so far, I think, are more like David's area, but we do have also our expert Laura here on the line. Laura from our team in Solibri. You might remember him from our previous webinar. So in case you have any Solibri specific questions, he can help in those. So let's start going through these questions that we have got so far. So for example, someone is asking what data source is used to determine carbon number.
So in your project, it's the person who is the LC analyst or the environmental consultant who works on the project that delivers relevant data. There are about 40 databases around the world with environmental data. I really like One-Click LCA from Finland, from Bionova, because they've got crawlers that creep through these other environmental databases, and they collect environmental data about material and digitalize them. So this is a great thing that we have. It's a commercial database, so it depends on how much money you can. What's the budget for working with environmental questions? But there are free databases out there. In Sweden, we have one called EnvironDeck, www.environdeck.com. And there you can find environmental data about concrete, about MEP components, about asphalt, and you name it. But you will have to go through it manually. And that environmental data is always done by different people, and it's communicated per different life cycle stage. So be very, very wary about what life cycle stage the data is considering, if it's the use phase or the production phase or the disposal phase or all together. And that is communicated in those 17 life cycle stages. And there should be a table in these documents that says, okay, in production, it's this much, in use, it's this much, and so on. So simply, it's the environmental consultant who knows what is relevant for the project. If you don't have that, then ask your project manager to acquire that competence in your team, because it will be really difficult to know otherwise.
Great, thanks. There was also a question: is the carbon number only available for architectural and constructural objects, or is it also possible to see HVAC object carbon footprint? So related to the previous question.
Yeah. I have seen some carbon numbers on ducts, on pipes, on aggregates, like on various machines. So that there are carbon numbers on various products. There are carbon numbers on textile, on food. It's all there in those environmental databases, such as EnvironDeck. So yeah, you will be able to find carbon numbers on HVAC components.
Great. Yeah, then there was a question about getting if it's possible to get the slides after the presentation. So first of all, if someone of you weren't on the line right from the start, so this has been recorded and this recording will be shared, so you can look the presentation or watch the presentation afterwards again, or share it to your colleagues. But I'll let David answer if the slides themselves are shareable.
Actually, if you go through the chat history, the very first comment there is from me, and there is a link to this presentation.
That's great, thank you. Then there are some questions on this BIM vision concept. That is all that you presented only applicable if you, in case you utilize BIM Vision, or like what can you do with BIM Vision and what can you do in Solibri? Kind of this differences between these topics or
So
services.
BIM Vision is a service where we try to improve communication of critical sustainability features. What I've done that Solibri doesn't have is that Excel file that generates color algorithms, or that has an algorithm that generates color palettes and translates numbers into colors. That part Solibri doesn't have. You can assign colors manually in classifications to numbers based on your liking, but you can do it algorithmically in Excel. And you do not have to have my tool. In Excel, you have conditional formatting as a feature. So you can use the classical red to green visualization that the conditional formatting has. So you can apply value-driven visualizations in Solibri using Excel without having to have my tool. But my tool has an extra feature that it can generate so many more color palettes than the conditional formatting feature from Excel has.
Yeah. Also related to this question, there were a couple that questions for our side. So I'll let Lauri comment that. Is there any specific manual for this Excel import and mapping, and is there any templates available?
Hello, and thanks David for a great presentation. I think for the manual, it's actually quite straightforward, the importing this Excel. So there's stages and it tells you what to do. Like you pick the map first, the columns, and then you choose the lines that you want to import. But I don't think we have a specific manual for this. And there was also someone asking about, is there like some ready-made templates? There are some, but not for like really these specific use cases. We don't have any ready-made templates.
Thanks, Lauri. Hope that answered the question. Let me check if we have still time for a few questions to go through here. So then there are some people asking if any of this, David, the Excel or the manual that you have showed, are any of those shareable, or can people download those somewhere?
Those who go to my BIM Visions for Solibri course, they will get access to my Excel file. Otherwise, we haven't yet thought about distributing it outside of Sweco in any other way. So we do not have a business model behind this Excel file, but you will get access to it if you go my course.
Then there was a question that, in your experience, David, how long does it take to, like the data structure processing? How long does that usually take?
Good question. To structure the Excel input takes no time at all. I mean, you really have to copy and paste the cells and rows in a concise manner, and you will be done with that in 1 hour. The mapping is the most time-consuming process. I've done the mapping in the classification called material, where I map CAD objects to the material categories by that tool Klimatkalkyl from Swedish Transportation Administration. And in this project, we've done these visualizations of carbon for a workshop with the engineers to give them something to think about. And the BIM manual did not think about having to work with carbon or life cycle analysis or anything like that from the beginning. So that's the time-consuming part, the mapping of material categories or whatever categories you want to map with the CAD objects. Because sometimes metadata is missing in the BIM model. Sometimes it's not straightforward. And you have to pick up a phone call and ask the structural engineer, what is this? And that takes time. This mapping process can be fully automated if your organization has a really good BIM manual and if the designers really follow it. Because then you can have a Solibri extension, which will basically do the mapping for any project, any model, because it's expecting that that metadata will come with the IFC file. And that has taken us about 40 hours to do the mapping for the structural model that you've seen.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. I think we have time for one more question, and then we will go through all the questions if there were some that were left unanswered and get back to you on those after later on after this session. So we are going to check every question out. Don't worry about that. We will share the recording. We will share if there are some unanswered questions, also those for everyone. So everything, we hope we get everything answered and get these materials for you to get back to after today. So have you used this for city or precinct planning? Was the one question.
We used BIM Vision for infrastructure planning. We used it for a hotel, and now I have part of a city terminal and this city district that has ordered BIM Vision, the preconditions part. And then there are 3 other projects by a major asset developer in Sweden. And they want to do active carbon mitigation using BIM Vision. So there it will be a core feature of the design process to actually mitigate carbon and come to almost net zero carbon footprint for those projects. And those buildings will be offices.
Yeah. All right. Unfortunately, like I said, we're running out of time, but we will check all the questions you've sent to the chat after this session and answer to you to those if you didn't get an answer yet. So yeah, about the future webinars, we have several webinars planned. So please follow our social media or your inbox to get, if you get the email invitations. We have next customer insights session will be in May, 13th of May, presentation coming from Skanska. We have also other customer insights sessions already in the planning. In addition to these webinars, we've started this new webinar series called Assist. These are more tutorial type webinars where we go through some kind of to learn how to use different things in Solibri. The next sessions will be held in the end of April, and they are about using Anywhere in different Solibri Anywhere product in different ways. So yeah, more information coming on these sessions soon as well. And please give us feedback. So we always appreciate all the feedback you're giving and do our best to make your wishes come true in the future sessions. But that's all for today. Thank you so much, David, for being our speaker today. Thank you for everyone on the line. It was great that there were so many of you again. And if you have any questions, you can contact us, of course, and we will do our best to help you.
Thank you for the invitation, Rita.
Thank you. and have a great day, everyone, and stay safe.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.